I'd invite your listeners to take note over the next week or so about how often they use the word or they hear someone else use the word, either in face-to-face interaction, on text messages, on social media, in a song, on TV, whatever the case may be. And I will
Right.
guarantee that they'll be shocked about how often they come across the word, right? And the question is, though, well, then how do we understand this? Why are we all using it so often? And so on.
Right. Yeah. I think an important thing as well is, like you say, how often it comes up. But I wonder if people think that, like, if you're at, let's say at an event, or meeting with a new person, let's say you're two friends and a new friend comes in. I don't think we have to share vibes. I think our vibes are for us.
Interesting.
Right. So, like, if you're meeting some, like, there's a story that we tell from university, that one of my best friends, he would always bring a new dude into the group, and I'd always get a bad vibe from these guys, and I would never say anything because it's not my position to police who's friends with who, but I'm like, something's off with that dude. And sure enough, a couple years later, you hear he did something shitty or stole a car, like all of these things that ended up coming true. And so I think we have to respect our own vibes and other people's vibes that they're getting, because we could be in even like a social situation, and if you don't feel something's good, you need to respect yourself for that.
Sure.
And yeah, like, are you finding ways? I think, as you said, like, you're intellectual. I think you help us maybe contextualize and think about these things a little bit under the surface
Mm-hmm.
than us just hearing, oh, this party's such a vibe,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, like, because again, but now, if I were to do your experiment next time at a party and someone says that, I would like to stop and think, like, oh, right, how do I feel about this party? Do I agree with her that it's him or whomever, that this is a good vibe, or do I not feel this is a good place for me?
Sure.
Because I think the more we check in with ourselves, I think it helps us move through the world maybe a little more confidently. So yeah, so I was going to say, are there any things through your research that you found has been more objective for how we look at this?
Well, there are certain, let's say, nonprofits or other organizations or think tanks out there that do in some way study vibes. And they may not call it vibes, but there are people out there that study this kind of stuff. And they're approaching it more from a scientific perspective. I'm not a scientist. I'm more of a philosopher, more of a theorist. But they do have certain kinds of ways of measuring certain kind of electromagnetic energy, things like that. Now, the question is, though, when we say, well, this vibe is the exchange of energy, the first question really is, what do we mean by energy? All right. So is this
Right.
that we're talking about, is it a physical phenomenon or a metaphysical phenomenon? Is it a material phenomenon or an immaterial phenomenon? Is it a scientific phenomenon or a spiritual phenomenon? Or maybe it's all these things at once. Right. And I
Right.
in this kind of way, though, because I'm not trying to necessarily posit a particular paradigm to understand this. There's 8 billion people on the face of the planet. We're all going to have a slightly different take on what we're talking about here. Right. Having said that, though, I think it's important for each individual to think through how they understand vibes and apply that understanding to their own life, right? And so when we talk about objectivity, when we talk about vibes, objectivity is difficult to assess here, but not necessarily, though. So if you and your friend are at a party and you will say, man, this is a really good vibe here, and you agree with that, that's a certain level of objectivity right there, right? You're both experiencing this thing that you can now talk about, and that's objective, right? Another way
Right.
about this is that, how do you know when you're in love? You know it, right? But it's hard to explain it, hard to put into words. A lot of fear often comes up, especially early on, right? But it is there, though. It is objective. You're not really entirely sure how to explain or understand it. And I think that's similar to a vibe, right? Where this thing is happening, a certain kind of dynamic is happening to myself and other people, right? We always can't explain it. So I'm trying to help people explain this for themselves.